new opinion poll shows Labour leading in the Scottish Westminster voting intentions for the first time. This is a poll by Redfield and Wilton.
Shows Labour leading the Scottish National Party by 2%.
It's only the third time Labour's led the SNP in any Westminster voting intention poll publicly since 2014.
So, joining us in the studio now is the Director of Jail Partners, the Pollster Scarlett Maguire. Were you surprised to see this, Scarlett?
No, I don't think surprised. I mean, we had that by-election in Rutherford and Hamilton in early October, which Labour took off the SNP with a massive swing, with sort of 20-plus point swing. So the fact that they've now sort of overtaken them, I wouldn't say a surprise. It is significant. I mean, we have seen them getting very close. There have been a lot of polls, even if they haven't overtaken them, where they've been sort of creeping up right behind the SNP. But I think really the writing was on the wall in October, that they might be looking to put on a huge amount of votes. I mean, bearing in mind, they're now in sort of the mid to high 30s percentage. They were at 20% with just one MP in 2019. So it's all very good news for Labour.
Disastrous for the Conservatives, because with only one MP last time, if Labour regain, gets 30, 40 MPs in Scotland, that's going to make a majority for Keir Starmer even more likely.
I mean, I think, you know, at the moment, everything looks quite disastrous for the Conservatives.
Right.
This is one of many. I mean, I think there was quite a lot of wishful thinking going on, especially over the summer. And I remember talking to a Conservative who said, oh, no, it's fine that Labour's doing much better in Scotland because actually, you know, if the SNP do worse, then we might get a couple more Scottish seats. Now, I don't think that's really the point, because what happens is it just becomes much easier for Keir Starmer to become PM if he can put on 20, maybe 30 MPs in Scotland.
And when you say nothing's going well for the Conservatives, we've had so many resets, the Tory conference, the King's speech, changing the position on 2035 to 2030 on net zero. We've had the tax cuts coming in January, but nothing shifted in the polls.
No, nothing shifted in the polls. If anything, things look like, I mean, they look like they've got worse since the summer. I thought maybe that sort of 20 points was the maximum damage we might see when it was sort of very static around 15 to 20 in the summer. And now not so sure. And I think having sat in quite a lot of focus groups over the last couple of weeks, I think the thing is about these resets is not only did they fail to move the dial in the Conservative favour, not only did, you know, bringing David Cameron back fail to give them a big bounce in the polls, it's actually been quite damaging, because what the public sees every time they see a reset is a sort of slight desperate flailing around, and actually they're now even less certain of who the Conservatives are and what they stand for. So actually they're a net negative.
How much of that negative is attributable to Rishi Sunak himself as the leader?
I mean, I think that's a good question. What we've really seen is, and I think potentially when he became leader, you know, over a year ago now, but I think people were maybe over-optimistic about how much he could pull out the Conservative Party brand. I mean, it was just it's been so damaged. It's been damaged by the last 13 years, I think, especially post-Partygate and then Liz Truss. And I think there was, again, actually quite a lot of wishful thinking, well, Rishi can pull it back because he's so great. I think what we've now seen over this year is maybe someone could pull it back. Doesn't look like it's him. And the problem he has now is that the good things that the public used to see in him, that he was competent, that he could make decisions, that he was sort of strong, I think, actually, that's sort of all fallen by the wayside. And so now what they see is someone who's not just out of touch, which is a problem, but is also weak. And I think that's going to be more of an issue.
Where was that wishful thinking coming from? You mean from within the Conservative MPs themselves? Because, of course, even the Conservative Party members didn't vote for Rishi Sunak. So when you say this wishful thinking that he was going to be a positive influence, who was doing that? Because the British public certainly weren't.
Well, I mean, I think in some ways they were and they weren't. So we did see a narrowing of the polls in sort of earlier this year when he sort of negotiated that Brexit deal. And I think there was quite a lot of hope. I think people, you know, there was a willingness to give him a chance.
Good point.
I do just think, and I actually still think, one thing that hasn't necessarily changed is that he remains the Conservatives' best hope at the moment, because changing another leader would be daft. There's no one obvious waiting in the wings. He was, I think, again, the best hope they had a year ago when they got, you know, 13 months ago when they got rid of Liz Truss. So that's actually unchanged. It's just the question is, you know, can he do it? And it looks like he probably can't.
Some MPs, I can say, would be shouting at everything. We should never have got rid of Boris. If Boris Johnson had stayed as leader, Scarlett, would the polls be any different?
Well, I think the thing is, what you have to think about is it's post-Partygate Boris. So, you know, pre-Partygate Boris, yes, a complete electoral force, a divisive figure, but someone who can be very popular. And actually, you know, was doing this in focus groups recently. You say Rishi Sunak's out of touch. What about Boris? And you say, oh, no, he's not out of touch because he tries to understand, So there's not that, but I think the problem was I think the damage that Partygate did and that Boris headed up and was the sort of the face of Partygate, that you can't come back from.
No, that's right. Because regardless of how you felt on either side of that debate, Boris Johnson let you down.
I think that's exactly it. And I think it's just so hard for the Conservatives to get around that sort of hypocrisy of setting rules which they're following themselves. And that's been so damaging. And everyone has a story, right? So it might not even be, some stories are horrific, some stories are less horrific, but, everyone has things they couldn't do, people they couldn't see. And it just makes it so much worse.
Yeah.
There was also the perception that Boris Johnson just wasn't telling the truth.
There was, but I think that was partly priced in before. So actually, I feel like the public are always quite clever and actually do get quite a good read of people. And there was a sense that Boris might fudge things, but it was sort of for the sake of a greater purpose. And they thought that fundamentally he was on his side. On their side, whilst he might be, not telling the truth completely for others, and that's gone, I think.
We've got Matt Hancock in the COVID inquiry today, a very, very controversial figure. Is the ongoing COVID inquiry damaging the Tory brand too?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So I think that's another problem. So anything, and this is actually, I think, part of the problem with bringing Cameron back, is that anything that ties Rishi Sunak to this idea of 13 years of Conservative failure is incredibly damaging. Now, you might say, OK, well, David Cameron didn't fail, but actually, voters just don't want to be reminded of another Prime Minister who they think walked out in disgrace. Again, actually, sort of whichever side of that Brexit debate you're on. And it's reminding them that these people have been in for a very long time, that we've seen a lot of different governments from them. The COVID inquiry is a much worse version of that. And I think anything that ties it to that drama and psychodrama and sort of, torturous stuff is just really damaging.